Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I'm Rob Skiff, founder and CEO of Oplerno, and this is Daniel Crompton, who is co-founder of Oplerno and our director of technology, and this is Team Meeting 78. And at this team meeting, we're going to discuss the EU-US Safe Harbor ruling that just went down last week. We're also going to discuss a New York Times article on student loans that was out in the paper, in the Sunday paper yesterday. We're going to talk a little bit more about our new onboarding procedures and the results so far, and talk about a drip campaign and anything else that you guys would like to discuss if you send us a question or a message. So without further ado, let's talk about the EU-US Safe Harbor ruling last week.
Well, that's actually quite interesting. I'll give you a little bit of the history if you hadn't heard about it yet. In Australia, if an Austrian fellow had joined Facebook and didn't completely agree with all the data they're going to and fro, and so he complained to all the Facebook in the Europe is registered. All the data is supposedly in Ireland. So he complained to the Irish privacy watchdog that he didn't think that his data was being treated securely enough. And the Irish watchdog said, yeah, well, we have this European safe harbor, US European safe harbor agreements in place in Europe, which puts demands on American companies to treat EU data with respect with due privacy. Of course, nobody ever believed that, but the ruling was in place. So last week we had a ruling by the European High Court, or the European Court of Justice, who said that since we have such high standards on privacy in the EU. It's almost impossible for US companies to hold to it. So there's no way that they'd even be able to comply with any of the portions of the safe harbor as they're written on paper. So basically, they nullified it. So that's good, and it's bad news for us. It's good news because our data is hosted in Europe. We have that we're very, very. Sorry. I'll back up a little bit. The reason that the US was where the US companies were unable to comply, of course, is because of the Snowden revelations. Of course, I completely forgot about that. So there's absolutely no way that everybody who's anybody in the US basically looks at all your private data, especially of Europeans, obviously. So that's why the EU High Court, the Court of Justice, said they didn't want it to. So, but for us, we have our data stored in the Europe. Or at least part of our data is stored in Europe, and some of our data is stored in the US for the unimportant data, and of course we have some other things. But for us, basically, it means that any of the data that's stored within Oplerno on our servers is no longer allowed to be transported to the US, since we didn't do that anyway. It's not so interesting for us. So that's say the there's no advantage or disadvantage for us there.
I would say actually there's an advantage for us in that this gives us an extra layer of protection when the US government comes knocking and wants data about our faculty or our students. The fact is that now we can say, that we can't comply because of the EU court ruling.
Yeah.
I like that. It may mean that I get to spend a little time in jail, but that's okay, because sometimes one needs a vacation. But no, the individual protection that this accords now to the student and the faculty level data is great. It's great that the European Court has done this. Of course, they'll be screaming about it in the United States, but that's fine. We really want to protect student and faculty data, especially because we're dealing with issues of free speech and academic inquiry. And we already have some classes that, depending upon your political viewpoint, might be, controversial or might not be supported in particular countries. I'm thinking of the Arab-Israeli course. I'm also thinking about Professor Bolden's Philosophy of Love class, and a few of the other philosophy and political science, along with some new courses that just came down the pike in terms of that are being developed on women's studies, on violence against women, and feminist theory. And all those are really, really important. And unfortunately, not the entire planet is not, they don't necessarily support the ideas of free speech and free academic inquiry. So this is great for us, and also great for the people who care about privacy, more or less. Although, as you pointed out, that doesn't mean that GHCQ in the EU and other internal agencies, this protects data from being directly transferred to America, to the US. However, that doesn't mean that different alphabet soup agencies in the EU can't be absconding with this data and freely sharing it with the data farm in Utah. Yeah. But we'll just have to deal with that when it comes. So it's really interesting, education. Here's an educational company, and what we're having to spend some time on is, of course, freedom of speech, freedom of academic freedom, but also issues of surveillance and data security. But that's, I guess, all part of it now. Yeah,
I think that's the world that we're living in at the moment. So.
Anything else you wanted to add about that? Is there, do you, is there, we've got, I don't know, is there anything else that, do you think that is going to be happening in terms of potentially the European courts, or that is going to affect us even more?
Well, this, of course, we have a whole load of people who are now scrambling to see, especially politicians and companies who are scrambling to see if they can't get their data right. One of the reasons I heard, not about the whole court case, but one of the reasons I heard that the decision had fallen and that the decision had been made was because one of the a US company of who I have service with, and they sent me an email saying, okay, it just happened now. This is what's going to happen. It's going to mean for your data. This is what it's going to mean for your company's data. It gave me a whole piece, which I thought was extremely interesting. That certain, especially large companies who in the United States who are already busy with transporting data across the world, already have had contingency plans for this and already had plans in place for this. These are, I'm not talking about social networks and people who but I'm talking about the real data companies.
Why can't you mention their name? Or if you don't want
what is it? Salesforce.
Salesforce.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know whether you. Yeah. Okay. Salesforce dealt with it.
Yeah, there are lots of other companies who are busy with this, but Salesforce is very much a data company who are doing more of the data transmission. There are lots of other companies who do some other things on different layers to do with this. No, but so there are contingency plans, and I'm worried at the moment because, of course, we have if we want to get it deeper into the future, I'm worried about what's TTIP and these type of things are going to mean for the privacy of your data, and for at least protecting it from companies and protecting it from governments.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see how in the U.S. there's some pretty stringent laws regarding student data, student privacy data, and who can have it and who can share it. And it's really going to be interesting to see what companies are in violation. They're either not doing a good job of securing the data, or or they're giving it over to government agencies with that. So, we're going to have to, theoretically, we've figured out different ways. We've discussed different ways to secure student data, and thank goodness, you've got the background to be able to, as we're building, when we were first discussing this 2 years ago, building in the procedures and the potential ability to add levels of security on onto our architecture right from the get-go, so that, you know, again, we're trying to think, you know, 4 or 5 steps ahead.
Yeah.
And on that pleasant note, let's just switch a little bit to the New York Times article. We'll paste that up on our notes that we'll put on both Woodblock and also that we're tweeting out. Yesterday, Saturday, there's an article about the student loan system stacked against the borrower. Basically, in the U.S., what has happened is that the government, it's a real weird thing. President Obama nationalized the student loan market, okay? Said that you will directly take out loans from the government rather than third-party providers. But of course, the government didn't have enough bureaucrats to administer the program, so they farmed out the management of and the servicing of the loans to third-party providers. The biggest of which is, of course, good old J.P. Morgan, and they have really cut out a lot of the smaller not-for-profits in the U.S. who were doing loan servicing agreements and having great success at both keeping people from, defaulting on their loans and keeping, working with people about particular payment plans. I'm thinking especially about Vermont's, the VSAC, Vermont Student Assistant Loan Company. They've had their entire portfolio of loans, of course, taken over by the federal government, and now they're having to borrow from to get contracts from J.P. Morgan. And what you have now is a system where these for-profit companies are, just creating miserable, a miserable environment for the students. And a monopoly system, the article, to quote the article, making matters worse, borrowers are not allowed to choose their servicers. So if they encounter problems, they cannot take their business elsewhere. So you have basically, crony capitalism, where these loans are assigned to particular companies. You as a student loan is taking out the loans. You as a student are assigned to these particular companies, and you can't get out of it. And so there is nothing, they're not competing to create better in service. They're just competing to extract as much possible cash from you as possible. And there is a real perverse incentive where students are not encouraged to pay off their loans early, or they actually earn more money the longer the loan takes to pay off. So is this really about helping the students, or is this really about helping the bottom line of, your J.P. Morgans and your large financial institutions? And the article did not mention the fact that student loans are now the highest debt class, with the exception of mortgages, in the United States. And they are a huge source of revenue because of the differentiation in fees. Large banks borrow from the Federal Reserve at about 0%. They then charge students 6%, anywhere between 4 and 6% on these loans, sometimes higher. And nobody's making 6% on the financial markets at all. Not very many. And so this is a huge source of revenue. In fact, it makes up over 50% of the Department of Education's revenue stream, according to College Disrupted, and whose author is Ryan, as I'm looking over at the book, as it said in College Disrupted. All right.
One of the things I find so surprising with this whole student loan things as well, and that we have this 1 point, or that you have.
It's Ryan Craig, College Disrupted. I know I was going to get that.
Thank you. But one of the things I always find strange, you have your 1.2 trillion in college in student loans, and these are all you have basically a really high interest rate. I mean, it's not as high as some of the credit card interest rates, but it's for European standards, that's a pretty high interest rate, especially since the interest rate is supposed to cover the risk of the loan. But these loans can't be defaulted on. These loans, you can't
Correct.
use these through bankruptcy court. You have to pay these off. These loans will follow you to your grave, basically. So there's a 6% interest rate covering the chance that you might default. There is no chance that you're going to default. So having a huge interest rate is completely strange. At least to me, it's in my eyes anyway.
Well, it's completely strange, 100%. And the fact is that this system is breaking down, and we're part of that solution. You've got to lower costs for students dramatically, and you've got to basically boycott, not participate in these programs, and provide education in a different way. And so we're just designing a system that's not going to get involved with student loans and get involved in extracting more and more capital from young people. And also, the sick thing is, who's making all the money? The students aren't making. The students are paying an incredibly high tuition, and the adjunct faculty members aren't making any money. And so, who is actually benefiting from this insanity? And it's certainly not the people who are actually teaching and the students who are actually trying to learn something, improve their lives, and create businesses and start the economy. But that's a riff that we've talked about at Oplerno a whole lot. I'd love feedback from faculty and students and any members of our community. We have internal debates about how radical we want to be in terms of how we discuss this. And I get a little bit more and more fed up about the system and playing the system. I'd like to know what you guys think. Could you let us know if should Oplerno become a little bit more radical in terms of how it's discussing these things, and really getting in the face of a lot of institutions and trying to become a leader in terms of discussing this exploitation? Or should we hang back, be a little bit more conservative, and be a good corporate neighbor, a good adjunct, a good subaltern to the system? So send us your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Let's we're going to discuss the DRIP campaign in a second, but let me discuss our a little bit about our new onboarding procedures. Last week we sent out an email to all of our faculty, and it was about our new onboarding procedures and the process that we were doing, and to get in contact with us to sort of recreate your account. We've had a really good response. We've had 12 faculty members over the past week, some of which were a little bit cold. Cold meaning that they hadn't engaged with us before or in a long time, came on board and are starting to redevelop their classes and are various stages in that. We also have a couple of faculty members. We kind of do our onboarding now in 4 stages. There's one which is making sure they sign the contracts and give them emails, and an initial meeting with an initial phone meeting. Then we move them on to training, where we discuss the different services that Oplerno offers for free, and some of them that are also commercial services. In other words, that you can pay for. You can pay for hourly support or take a 2-week class online to help you develop your online pedagogical skills or learn about Canvas. And then there's also some support of, give us a bunch of your materials and we'll convert them to a Canvas course that you can use. And once you've been trained, you get into course development, which is another step where we are working on creating the marketplace portfolio profiles, going over your syllabus, your grading rubrics, creating your modules, your discussions, doing the 2-week class, adding graphics to your pages, and then the last step, which is marketing. And we said that once your course has been approved, we create a landing page for you, and that Daniel's designed. And of course, once a class is approved, then we go to our networks of institutions to discuss teaching that class with students there. But also, we're spending a bunch of time thinking about how do we create different ways to attract students to take the class and then transfer them to either another institution or to build up the portfolio. And that's part of the last piece, which is the the drip campaign. So the new onboarding procedure, I think, works a whole lot more. It's great for me because I'm spending a lot more time talking to faculty and talking to people, which is excellent. And it's also nice. I no longer have to be sitting writing around my dissertation and getting that in. That's completed and waiting for the defense date. And then I'm really excited to publish it on Oplerno's site once it gets approved, hopefully in November. So we're working on the marketing piece. We're looking at the strategy of we've already got institutions who have requested and sponsored, who have requested classes from us and are starting to get into the situation where they're guaranteeing a certain number of students per class that they want, which is great. And then we'll expand that out to market to other students so that we can, students outside, so that we can, create those classes of between, 10 and 15 students at a section. Daniel, do you want to just talk a little bit about the drip campaign?
Yep. Yeah. So, excuse me.
You okay?
Yeah. No, a sneeze coming down. So the drip campaign. I've been working with on a. We've been doing a lot of the preparation on what are the steps actually that you're taking when you're building up a course, when you're making creating a course, when you're marketing a course, for example, or when all the different sections, all the 4 sections that Rob mentioned, or 3 of the sections at least. All of these can be split into small sections, small sections and small tasks which can be performed, just like we're doing with the courses. That we're not creating 2-hour-long videos for students to watch, and that it makes them completely bored and they lose all track of all the information. We're actually cutting it up into bite-sized chunks, and we're actually serving it to them so they can actually understand it, and they can get better in contact with it and have a better feel. But the same is for a drip campaign. Really, is to take this data of the creating a course, doing your part of your own marketing, creating your own or finding more input for your course materials and things like that, turning this into a drip feed so that we slowly send the faculty members portions of the information, such as one of the first emails that they get is to, for example, to go to Amazon, which is a great way to search for their course subject. So they search for the top 5 or the top 10 books. Or explains that you've searched for the top 5 of the top 10 books, and then go and have a look at not the 5-star ratings or the 1-star ratings, but at the 3-star ratings, because that contains so much data and a wealth of data of what people have read the book, who are willing to who've gone to the site, put their information down. They've given proper critique. I mean, a 3-star rating is not I just hated it. Put 1 star. They've actually taken the time to write a critique often enough. Writing down what they're missing, what could have been better in the book, and to take this information that's in your people saying, talking about your subject, about the information, and people actually saying, okay, this information that we want about this subject, this is information that we would like to read, to learn about this subject, or to read about this subject, which is great. But to have things like this cut up into small tasks that we can actually have people that do, such as visit Amazon, have a little look at this, write down 10 items, or take the information that you took out of you did in week 1, and use that to write a tweet, for example, using the words that you took from your Amazon test. Use that to write tweets, or to write blog posts, or to write other things that you can use then to promote your course. Really, really, really fantastic. But slowly to build up the course as well as the marketing campaign. And of course, this all feeds into a final landing page, which we should also absolutely grace it.
Yeah, so lots of different things happening. We're working on the marketing piece. Again, everything's going to depend upon acquisition channels that probably right now are going to be more focused in on institutional affiliations, and that's going to be the way forward to start filling more and more classes. Again, the more content we have in terms of those completed courses, the more that we can go to other institutions and really subvert that whole Pearson's notion, which is, Pearson's charges about $500 for a seat in the class providing content. They don't, then a university hires an adjunct to teach that content and pays them very, very little. Well, we have faculty that produce excellent content and can also teach, and you guys get at least 80% of the tuition revenue. Remember, the deal is Oplerno takes 10% or $100, whichever is greater. So your ability to make a lot more money and make a good living as a faculty and adjunct member, freed from the institutional politics, is great. And to be perfectly blunt, administrators do like this. They're able to really invigorate their adjuncts. Not all administrators are bad or evil. They want their faculty to do well and to make a living. This system, though, does cost sort of traditional tenured faculty a bit of their power, but it places then adjunct faculty much more at the center and gives you all an incredible place at the table, and also a lot more job security than you would have otherwise. So check us out. Keep working. We really appreciate all the email messages and words of support. Realize that we're working hard at really changing higher ed for the better, for all of us, and we will see you online next week.
See you online.